Well, happy Sabbath, everyone, and welcome to this morning's study. Um, as you can see, we're going to be looking at two solar eclipses. This is just a paper I've been working on, and it does relate to what we've been studying in regard to July 18, 2020, and some of the symbolic use of numbers. So before we begin, can you join me in a word of prayer? Dear Father in heaven, we are so grateful for each person. We pray for one another. You know the trials that we face. We know of Dwight's trials and Angela's, but we know that many of us have things that we have to face each day, and we need your grace and wisdom. We ask that we can trust in you in spite of what's happening around us, and that we can have assurance that you are in control of all of the events of our lives and of this world. We pray, Lord, that as we look again at the symbolic use of numbers, and particularly as they relate to these solar eclipses, we ask for your Spirit to give us a clear understanding. And we thank you for the time that we have here, and we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so I do have the paper that I'm working on. Of course, I'm not finished with it yet. So this is just the title of the paper, Two Solar Eclipses, August 21st, 2017 to April 8th, 2024. And the reason that I originally thought of writing the paper is, of course, there's just all kinds of videos on YouTube talking about this solar eclipse, these two different solar eclipses. And the one back in 2017, I paid a bit of attention to. 2017, of course, is 7 years ago, and it was an important year in this movement. It's when the movement had begun the work of organization. So there's going to be an organizational meeting in Italy in 2017. And I don't believe that organization was of God. I believe that that was a mistake. If there was a mistake that this movement made, it was having Parminder in charge of organizing the movement. And that led to a major split in the movement. In 2017, I ended up in September going to the School of the Prophets. And I was invited there to speak. I taught on the structure of prophetic chronology. And basically I did so because many of the teachers weren't there. They were in Italy. And so that's why I was there in 2017. I was also there in 2018. Heidi and I were there for about 5 months into 2018 and 2019. But in 2017, there's lots of things that were going on in this movement. There was the prediction before midnight. On September 23rd, 2017, I'm going to present July 18th as a symbol of the prediction before midnight, 3 days before midnight as a symbol. And so I noted this solar eclipse at the time. And later on, when I understood the significance of the Revelation 12 sign prophecy, which we're going to look at a little bit here, we will be able to sort of see what the significance of these eclipses are. And I believe that that all of the different interpretations that are going on are misguided. Okay. So the first thing is there are eclipses in the past that are being referenced. And this one here, the Assyrian eclipse, is a solar eclipse. It's often called the Bur-Sagali eclipse because that in the eponym canon of the Assyrian kings, he would be the mayor of Nineveh at the time. And this is an eclipse that happened on June 15th, 1763 BC. You see that little image, if you can see that, it says 762 with a minus sign 010 or minus sign 0762, June 15th. That's because they're using a 0 year. So that's why it says 762. And that eclipse is almost directly over that area. The totality of it, it goes through Nineveh. It's seen in its totality in the city of Nineveh.
Purple line? Is that the purple line?
The blue line, yeah, the purple, blue line, whatever. I guess it's kind of English. Yeah, probably right. It's purple. Yeah, so that line is the path of the eclipse. You can see that it actually crosses northern Africa, the Mediterranean. It goes through the land of Israel, and just to the left of that center of it is going to be the city of Nineveh. So I'm not sure exactly how many miles that, and that would be the what they call the that's the place where there's the most totality, is that place. That's the center of that eclipse. But anyway, people try to connect this to the preaching of Jonah. Now the problem is they use the chronology that's in Wikipedia, which is basically Edwin Thiel's chronology, which rejects the biblical chronology. So they say that Jeroboam II ruled from 786 to 746 BC, according to 2 Kings 14:25. Well, he ruled for 41 years. They have their 40 years. And so they have a bit of an explanation that this would be the time when Jonah was preaching, but that's not correct. So Jeroboam II was 723 BC to 782 BC. That's when he was ruling, and it's going to be near the beginning of, or somewhere at the early part of Jeroboam II's reign, possibly that Jonah went to Nineveh and said that they had 40 days, right? It's going to be about 40 years later that the eclipse actually occurs. You know, it could be 30, 40, it could be a bit more. There's not any way of exactly pointing out how far it was from when Nineveh repented to when the eclipse occurred, but it's about 40 years. Okay, so a lot's made of that eclipse. I also note about the Exodus eclipse. So this is an eclipse that I think is significant in that it's going to occur in Egypt in 1533 BC, around the time of the Exodus, specifically 2 weeks after the Exodus.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and the path of the eclipse crosses the Red Sea, not far from where the Israelites cross. And it's 2 weeks after the Exodus, right? So the Exodus, obviously, it occurs. They're going to leave on the 15th day of the first month, which is April 26th on the Julian calendar, and that's going to be, you know, in connection, of course, with the full moon, right? And it's going to be at the new moon that you have the eclipse. So that's why it's about 2 weeks after. Okay. Oh, Daniel asks here, Baguma asks, why do some people place it on May 10th, 1533? And that's because they're looking at the place where the eclipse begins. So the thing about an eclipse, astronomers, they have their days start at noon, not at midnight, by the way. And the eclipse is going to occur just before sunset. The total eclipse is actually going to be about, well, it depends on, you know, which, if you're counting actual local time based upon noon being 12 o'clock, right? So they didn't have daylight savings, and they didn't have time zones. So if you look at it, that it's just after 6 o'clock that the eclipse is going to occur. it's going to occur for about 3 minutes. So, anyway, the eclipse actually starts way off in the west, and where it starts, it's actually on the other side of the times, what do they call it? The international date line. So that's why they say the eclipse is at May 10th, 1532 is what they have listed. But it just has to do with how they're counting time. Okay, makes sense? Does that answer your question? Yeah, it kind of confused me at first. I had to take a look at it. But yeah, so technically they would do the time of the eclipse starting on May 10th. But when you actually get to Egypt, it's going to be the day before, May 9th, right? So yeah, really confusing sometimes how astronomers do things. Okay. So that eclipse anyway is pretty interesting. So we can say that eclipses have significance, right? But it's 1533. So the 1532 is using a Gregorian calendar with a 0 year. That's why it says 1532, May 10th, 1532. So that's going to be May, in Egypt, it's going to be May 9th, 1533, because we're using the Julian calendar, not the Gregorian. And it's kind of weird because astronomers use a 0 year for their, which is a Gregorian idea, but they still use Julian dates. So they kind of mix the Julian and Gregorian together. It's very confusing. And of course, the day starts at noon, right? And they use Julian day numbers actually mostly.
Well, so you said they see the days starting at noon, you're saying?
Astronomers start the day at noon because it's much easier for astronomy instead of having the days, when you're going to give a date, it's going to include the whole night because astronomers generally look at things at nighttime, not at daytime, right?
Right.
Okay. So where you get the confusion is stuff that happens during the day, like an eclipse, that sometimes it'll give you two different dates depending if it's crossing the international date line or not. Okay. Now, we know that astronomical events are important. In Genesis 1, verse 14, it says, God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. Now, of course, the signs, that's the ot, those are, and in this case, it's plural otot. So that's just how you pluralize ot. It's this doubling, which is kind of interesting. And it means tokens, signs of God's judgments or blessings and miracles. And these literally are signs in the heavens, right? So the sun and the moon were given to keep track of time to mark the seasons, the Moedim, that's the feasts, the days, the Yamim, and that is the Yamim as in Erev and Boker, right? Evening and morning, and then the years Shanim, right? But they're also given as signs. So we know that astronomical events can be significant. And we see in lots of different places, but here in Revelation 6, verse 12 to 17, it says, when I had opened the sixth seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood, and the stars of the heaven fell to the earth as a fig tree drops its late figs when it is shaken by a mighty wind. Then the sky receded as a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place, and the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the commanders, and the mighty men, every slave and every free man, hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. The great day of his wrath has come, and who is able to stand? And it doesn't look like the King James that I have there. I'm not sure why. I might have to change that. And then we also see in Matthew 24:29, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So we can see that these harbingers, or signs in the heavens, these are going to be fulfilled in Millerite history. We have the dark day in 1780, and we have the falling of the stars in 1833. So there's all these verses that relate to that. So now what I wanted to look at here then was in relationship to the time of the end, we have some early American eclipses. So this is in the paper. I don't want to go to it in too much detail here. But after America, after 1776, the first solar eclipse that's going to be witnessed in the United States is June 24th, 1778, right? So this is, it's about 20 years before the time of the end, right? In 1798. And then there's going to be another one 2 years later, on October 27th, 1780. So this second eclipse was preceded 161 days earlier by the Great Dark Day of May 19th, 1780. So it's interesting, in the year 1780, where we have the Great Dark Day, we also have an eclipse 161 days later, okay? Now, of course, we know the Great Dark Day was not a solar eclipse because it was during a full moon. And we know it's one of the events which was a fulfillment of Joel 13:15 and Matthew 24:29 and others. These were part of the signs marking the end of the 1260 years of papal persecution as prophesied in Daniel 7, verse 25. So we know that Ellen White says, and I need to add this, I just haven't put it in the paper, but that this dark day occurred how long after the prophecy was given by Joel? Anybody remember?
What was that again?
Ellen White says that this prophecy of the dark day, which is in Joel 3:15, occurred how long after the prophecy was given? How long is it after the prophecy was given? She gives us a number of years. Anybody know what those were?
Yes.
Okay, so how many years does she say from the giving of the prophecy to its fulfillment on May 19th, 1780? Anybody know how many years? We should all know this. Maybe people are just too shy.
Is it 100 years?
No, the prophecy was given 2,500 years earlier. So Joel gives this prophecy 2,500 years earlier. And she says it's about 20 years, something that I can't remember her exact wording, but when persecution has ceased, about 25 years, I think she says, before the time of the end. But anyway, if you put, this period of time here, 2,500 years, and you add, another 20 years, you would have 2520. So it's pretty close. It's one of those ways that you can see that there's this connection with the 2520. So Joel is going to be prophesying around the time of the fall of northern Israel, right? So it's just right after that, I believe, that he's going to be writing his prophecy. So anyway, we have this prophecy of Joel that's fulfilled with this great dark day. And then we're going to have some more eclipses, or another. These two are going to happen in the 1800s. The first is going to be on June 16th, 1806, and the next one on September 17th, 1811. And they're going to create an X over America. I don't have a map of showing the X of these two eclipses. But they're going to create an X, and they're going to cross this place called New Madrid. Okay, so New Madrid is a place that's originally in one of the territories. It's going to later become part of Missouri. And there's going to be some earthquakes connected to this. So there's going to be the New Madrid earthquake of 1811. So some people say that these were warnings of the coming earthquake. Now, the first eclipse is an annular eclipse that occurred on June 16th, 1806. And it moved across continental US from Baja California all the way to Massachusetts, with the city of Detroit and other parts of the South, Michigan falling under its path of totality. 65 months, or 1,919 days later, on September 17th, 1811, it was followed by an annular eclipse. Now, this should be total. I think I made a mistake here, because one of them's so this one should be a total eclipse. I don't know why. I'm going to have to check that again. So an annular eclipse is just the moon is a little bit farther away from the Earth, so it doesn't quite do a total eclipse. You see a ring. That's why annular. As noted earlier, this eclipse is noteworthy because of its proximity to a series of earthquakes centered around New Madrid. These earthquakes followed the 1811 eclipse 90 days later, beginning on December 16th, 1811. I don't know why I have that written twice. So I'm going to have to correct that. With a magnitude of 8.2 and with an aftershock of 7.4. And then two more similar earthquakes followed 38 days later on January 23rd, and then 14 days after that on February 7th in 1812. They are the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded east of the Rockies in the continental US. At the time, New Madrid was then part of Louisiana Territory, which presently lies in the state of Missouri. Okay. So now the next eclipse, I do have a mark. So these next two eclipses, they're going to create an X over this territory, which would be in, I guess that's Georgia, it looks like. Just hard to see this map clearly. No, that's not going to be Georgia. Mississippi, Arkansas. Yeah, that must be Georgia. I'm not certain. Okay. Anyway, so you see here these eclipses. There's going to be February 12th, 1831. Now, what do we know about 1831 in Bible prophecy? What's the importance of 1831?
According to American history, is it not the year when William Miller received the license to start preaching?
Okay, so he's going to do his first preaching in 1831. He receives his license in 1833, right? So they are connected. And sometimes people get the two confused, right? So in 1831, he begins to present his message for the first time. And then in 1833, he's going to get his license. Now, also at that time, there's a guy named Nat Turner, who's going to start an insurrection against the slaveholders. And so some people connect that because he actually takes this as an inspiration that God is leading him. Now, also, this eclipse is paired with the total solar eclipse of November 30th, 1834. So you're going to have 3 years later, another eclipse. And this crossed the southeastern United States. And a map maker named Charles Bowen, he made this 1833 map where it shows the eclipses crossing paths. So, so he made this map in 1831, and since there was an eclipse that year and there was one coming up, he put the path of these eclipses on this map. Right. And then you're going to see there's, solar eclipses in 1860 and 1869 and 1878. And I have a little chart here with all these different eclipses, and it looks like I kind of messed it up somehow. I'm not sure how I did that. No, that was no good. I'm going to have to figure out what's wrong with this. I must have to move these over somehow. Anyway, I'll work on that later. So one thing that we will see here, and I have a list of 20th century American eclipses. Eclipses are very common. There can be as many as 5 eclipses, solar eclipses in a year that could be seen from Earth. Generally, there's about 2. Sometimes you get 3. Sometimes you get 4. Very rarely 5. I think it's 5 eclipses in a year have occurred only 25 times in the last 5,000 years. So, but the thing is, from a local point of view, the chances of you seeing a total solar eclipse are limited, right? So most of these solar eclipses are going to occur in places either over large bodies of water like the Pacific or the Atlantic Oceans, or in uninhabited places. They could be witnessed in like very southern parts of the world or very northern parts where people don't live, right? So it's just not common to see a total solar eclipse as an individual. So, I mean, if you're living in a place, for instance, where those solar eclipses are going to cross paths within a short period of time, like 3 years apart or 6 years apart or 7 years apart, which is it's common that you're going to have an eclipse cross another one in a short period of time. So whether there's going to be somebody living there is uncertain, but in this case, we do have, with these 2 eclipses, the one in 2017 and the one in 2024, a lot being made about the places where they cross paths. And so people have all kinds of theories. There's lots of different town names that people are going to address, which we're going to look at a little bit, why they think that's important. But you can see there's lots of eclipses in the United States. These are American eclipses listed here. You got one right in 1900, and then you got 1918, 1923, 1925, 1930, 1932, 1945, 1954, 1963, the year I was born, 1970, 1979, right? And then we go for quite a while without an eclipse in America, a solar eclipse that's viewable in America, until we get to 2017. Well, actually, I think there might be another one in, late in the early 21st century, but just not seen by as many people. Now, the other thing is we have the internet now. So back then, we might not even have heard about some of these eclipses unless you were going to be affected by them. I know the one in 1979, that one, I did see a partial eclipse. I made a pinhole camera in a cereal box, and then I could see that a little bit of the sun was being by the shadow going through this pinhole, you could see that a little bit of the sun was being covered. But I was in Alberta. This was more over further east of us that it would have been seen, but not that far east. It covered quite a bit of the sun. It wasn't just a little corner. And I did see one, a solar eclipse, a partial solar eclipse at sunset in 1988. Just as the sun was going down, a little bit of the sun was covered by the moon. But I've never witnessed a total solar eclipse. So then that'd probably be true for most of you. Is there anybody here who's witnessed a total solar eclipse?
I did in 2017.
Yeah, because I was wondering if you had, because it did go through Oregon. Now, did you have to drive?
Yeah, I drove up to Springfield.
Yeah, because
Springfield and saw it and drove back.
So what was that experience like?
It was unique.
So it was worth the drive?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
everybody was excited. It was in a pumpkin patch out middle of nowhere. There's other people out there.
I think I seen one in the 80s, late 80s.
Well, there wouldn't have been one in the 80s because I have all the American eclipses, unless you were someplace that wasn't America.
No, I wouldn't. I know I seen an eclipse sometime or another.
Well,
I don't
maybe,
forget when it
maybe in 79, but I don't know.
might have been in 79 because I was working for state, North Carolina State at the time. We was doing road work in Castle County, I think it was.
Where was that? Which
Castle
state?
County,
Which
state,
state?
North Carolina State.
Okay. Well, I don't know if that one would have been seen. I mean, I could look it up, and maybe there was one in 1970 in South Carolina, but anyway,
I noticed the crickets started chirping more when it was totality.
oh yeah, they all think it's
Well, anyway, I saw one, whether it was in the 79 or
yeah. Okay. So you've seen one sometime, so I could look that up a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah, and Eldon was down in Tennessee at the time. So he says he saw that one. Okay, interesting. Now, I thought of going to see it, but at the time I was moving up north, and we were in the area. We went through the area in 2017 where the eclipse was going to be, but that was a bit earlier. So I definitely didn't get to see that eclipse. Now, the idea, the prophetic significance of solar eclipses. So we can see that these things are not as rare as people think. And if you're going to put these eclipses and you're going to say, well, this event happened in connection with an eclipse. Well, there's lots of events and lots of eclipses. And we wouldn't even know about many of these eclipses except because of social media nowadays. In the past, people might not even know that some eclipse happened. And definitely not every place in the world is witnessing these eclipses when they occur. And so you might have to say, well, how can we decide what that eclipse means? Right? So in the past, obviously, people would be surprised by a solar eclipse happening. And it would make sense that if some momentous event had happened shortly after a solar eclipse, that they would connect that to meaning. But I would think from a biblical perspective, we would have to look at how these are tied to prophecy. That is, for me to just say, well, there's a solar eclipse, it crossed the United States in a big X, these two solar eclipses. And that means that they are significant. They're a warning to America or a judgment upon America. It's happened before. And we can't even connect them to anything with America specifically. Now, there's a comment here about Madrid. So New Madrid is this place where they're going to have these earthquakes, which means a place of abundant waters. It's an Arabic word. This may have some connection with Revelation 17:1, referring to New Madrid in this document. Of course, Spain was a big player in the First Inquisition under the return of papal supremacy. So this is, Angela actually makes this comment. So the 2017 eclipse in Salmon Arm. Okay, so well, that eclipse you wouldn't have seen a totality in Salmon Arm because it was just in America. But anyway, so yeah, I don't know the significance, like with the New Madrid earthquakes. There's lots of eclipses where we can't really attach any significance to them. And we don't have a prophecy about the New Madrid earthquakes. We could say that because of those earthquakes, they're going to occur in connection with what do they call that war again? Between where William Miller is going to be, it's going to be connected to his conversion. That's going to happen in the War of 1812. Yeah, 1812. So you're going to have those earthquakes starting in 2000 or 1811 going into 1812. And maybe there's some kind of connection there prophetically with the time of the end. But there would be a connection with prophetic periods, right? So we could kind of accept that. Now, when it comes to different types of things like the dark day, we know there's also going to be the falling of the stars. And that's going to be November 12th, 1833. And so we could take those two eclipses, the one in 1831 and the one in 1834, maybe connected with the falling of the stars, right? That's going to be the Leonid meteor shower that's seen across the United States, and an spectacular, unlike any before it or after it. Now, I did experience the Perseid meteor shower, August 11th, 1980, right? So that was the evening that I was converted. So I'm going to try to get this done here. I got about 20 minutes. Now, a big deal is made on the internet regarding the names of towns that are going to experience this solar eclipse. Now, it was noted that there was 7 municipalities named Salem that experienced, not the 20, boy, I gotta get this right, that experienced the 2017 eclipse. Now, one of them would have been Salem, Oregon, I guess, eh? Can't remember. I have a list of them.
Yeah, Salem, yeah, Salem.
Right. And now there is somewhere between 38 to 42 places in the United States named Salem. So it's pretty common name. And you could count, things like there's counties, that are named Salem, and it's a pretty common thing. It's a pretty common name. Now, of course, it's an old name for Jerusalem, right? So, which means the city of peace, and Salem means peace. And so people have made this huge deal about it. There was 7 cities named Salem that witnessed this totality of this eclipse. Now, in 2024, there's purportedly 7 places in the U.S. named Nineveh that are in the eclipse path. Now, there's now here I put 38 towns named Salem, but there's actually only 2 of the towns named Nineveh that are going to experience the path of totality. So there isn't 7. Now, why people say that there's 7? Well, there's some that are going to witness partial eclipses, but most of continental United States is going to witness a partial eclipse of some sort or other with this eclipse. I mean, there might be parts where it's just too far away, but most are going to witness some kind of eclipse. Some won't be noticeable unless you actually look at the sun, because it won't really dim it that much. You'd have to be much closer to totality to notice the shadow, because there is a shadow, the umbra. It's called the penumbra. Right, the umbra is actually the place where you have the eclipse itself, and the penumbra is the place outside of the eclipse, but does experience a shadow, if I remember correctly. Okay, so, but the question is, why would this even matter? That we can pick names of cities. I guess, one of the places that's where these eclipses cross, there's a place called Rapture. And so, some evangelicals are speculating that the secret rapture is going to happen on April 8th. These types of things, I understand why they appeal to people, but obviously the secret rapture is not true. And so the next thing I want to look at is just Nashville. So in 2017, we're going to see that this eclipse crossed, that it was witnessed in Nashville. So I noted that back after we started talking about Nashville. I looked back at, okay. Yeah, so Angela has some stuff there about amazing discoveries. Are you talking about Dawn Frost's video? Is that where you saw this?
Yeah, I haven't been looking at this stuff at all, so I'm just saying, well, possibly I want to see for myself. Is there an event such and such a state and such a state, and does the shadow of the eclipse travel in a direct line through the city?
Yeah, I've done it. I've already done.
Okay.
It's in my paper. I'm going to have the map and all that. No, it's not true.
Okay, I'm glad to know that, but I will still look.
Yeah. I mean, there's some that are close. They're going to see a partial eclipse, but there's one that's quite out of line with it, and you have to look at the fact of how much of the eclipse, there's only goes through two places named Nineveh, and it doesn't get to.
All right, that's good, because they were saying 8.
And yeah, well, the 8 is supposed to be Nineveh, Nova Scotia, but it doesn't.
Right.
It's not going to pass over Nineveh, Nova Scotia. So, and there are going to be towns named Salem that are going to see totality again. I don't know if any of them are the same Salem, but Salem's such a popular name. Nineveh, there's 8 places in the United States called Nineveh, 1 in Canada called Nineveh. 2 of the places in the United States will experience the eclipse in totality. And almost every place in the United States is going to witness some of the eclipse, right? So, I mean, if we're going to include the penumbra, I'd have to look at that in more detail, but I think some of them are outside of that. That is, they're not going to experience any shadow, but those things are a little bit subjective as well. Okay, so we know that people make a big deal about these town names, but with Nashville, we have a prediction that was made, right? So we made a prediction regarding Nashville. Now, that eclipse in 2017 was 33 days before September 23rd, 2017. On September 23rd, 2017, there's going to be the Revelation sign prophecy. But also I'm going to present July 18 as a symbol of the prediction before midnight on that day. So you can see that that's 777 days before November 9th, 2019. And so if you add the 33 days to 777, you're going to get 810 days prior to November 9th, 2019, that that eclipse occurs. And so with the 8810, what does that symbolize? 81. Anybody know what 81 represents?
The priesthood. Second
Okay.
Chronicles 20, I think it is.
Yeah, and it represents also, the priesthood. We connected somewhat with midnight, with Ellen White being 81 in 1900, whichever was the last general conference she went to. Okay, so anyway, what you see in front of here is just, I just wrote this morning, so it probably has typos in it. But we're going to see that this total solar eclipse, you can see in the top image, it's going to show Nashville and shows Tennessee, and Nashville is going to experience an eclipse, which actually is 1 minute and 56 seconds, and 44 seconds less than the center of the path closest to their location. So I was telling Orion it was 1 minute and 44 seconds, but I just had read it wrong. So 1 minute and 56 seconds, 44 seconds less. So it's going to be, let me see. So that was in 2017. Now, this one in 2024 is only they're going to see 97% totality in Nashville, right? So they're not going to see totality. So it doesn't cross them twice. But it is going to be seen in an important location, which is Bonnerdale, Arkansas. Now that's about 20 miles west of Hot Springs. And that was the main town where we would do shopping when I was at the School of the Prophets. Bonnerdale is the town that Jeff uses as his address. He's just a few miles from Bonnerdale. Can't remember how far, maybe 10 miles, something like that. And so Jeff will experience this total solar eclipse, right? Now, in Bonnerdale, the totality of the eclipse is going to be 3 minutes, 51.9 seconds. So that's a symbol of 391 and a half. It's got all the digits of that.
Pretty long eclipse.
Yeah, it's fairly long. Yeah. It's a fairly long eclipse. So 3 minutes.
I think the longest one was around 7 minutes, right? The
Yeah.
longest eclipse.
Yeah, you can get something around 7 minutes. Yeah. And it depends where you are along the path of totality, right? So there's a place where there's the greatest amount of eclipse that, scientists want to go to. They always hope that the weather's going to be good. I know there's one scientist way back in ancient times, he went to, not really ancient times, but like a couple hundred years ago or something. And he wanted to see an eclipse. And when he got there, it was overcast and rainy, and he didn't really get to do some of his experiments. I can't remember the guy or when it was exactly. But now there are some interesting details regarding this. So let me see if I've written this down. Yes. So one of the things about the eclipse on April 8th, 2024 is it's 1,360 days after July 18, 2020. So if we remember that Jeff is going to speak on December 30th, 2023, basically for the first time after July 18, 2020, that's going to be 1,260 days. So this eclipse on April 8th follows 100 days later. So it's going to be 1,360 days from July 18, 2020 to April 8th, 2024. Now, the interesting thing about the number 1360, if you put it into base 8, so 1360 is obviously base 10, that's what we always use, but base 8, which is octal, it actually produces the number 2520. Now, so since that eclipse is passing, it's going to be seen in at Future for America, 1300
Theodore,
degrees after July 18. Yes.
Brother Theodore, the bass. What is bass? Is it like have to do with music?
Now, bass is like base 10 is you have 10 fingers,
Right,
right? So there's 10 digits, right?
right.
Base 8, there's only 8.
Okay,
From 0 to 7. So base 8 doesn't have an 8 in it, right? Just goes 0 to 7 and keeps repeating over. Okay.
all right. What is how'd you say it?
Octal just means base 8.
Okay,
Oct.
octave means bass.
Right.
All right,
So it's going to be 2520 in base 8, which I think is pretty interesting. So an 8 is a symbol that we've used. It's actually, Jeff has done lots of presentations on the number 8, right? And it's something that we've used before, base 8 and base 16, which is 8 plus 8. Okay, so in base 16, they have to have other symbols. They usually use letters to represent numbers, right? Because there's not enough numbers. But so we have 2520 days if we count them in base 8 from July 18th to April 8th, 2024, when Jeff would be able to witness this eclipse in totality. And I'm suggesting that this is connected to the rejection of July 18, 2020. That is, we can connect the first eclipse to the 777 days from September 23rd, 2017, where we get the July 18 symbol. And then we have November 9th, 2019. And then we have the 252 days to July 18th. And then from July 18th, there's 2520 days in base 8 to this eclipse that Jeff will be able to witness if he goes outside. I guess even if he stays inside. So I think it is significant as a marker. Now we know that 2 days after April 8th is going to be the first day of the first month, April 10th, right? So you can see that the new moon wouldn't be seen, obviously, on the day of an eclipse or the day before. It's going to be seen a day or two after. And that's why the first day of the first month is going to be a couple of days after the eclipse, because eclipses occur during what we call the new moon, but it's not going to be visible until a day or two later. So, so this I think is the significance of this eclipse, that it is a message to this movement, and we can see that it's a judgment against the rejection of July 18, 2020. It shows, it's a warning, right? Now, some people may not believe it, right? So people can easily dismiss it. But I don't think that we should, definitely we're not going to say that this is about a judgment on America in some particular way. That's definitely not the secret rapture going to be happening. We're not tying it into futurism or anything like that. But we can tie it in to what this movement has experienced, that it is part of that structure. Any comment on that? You can see the path of totality there, Barnardale's by Hot Springs down here. There's the center of the total eclipse, but they're going to not experience the center of it.
Pretty close.
Yeah, pretty close. Okay. Now, I do also have,
close almost.
yeah. Now, I just wanted to go back, and I'm probably going to do this in a different order. This is just me writing. I got the Revelation 12 sign and the eclipse, right? So I just mentioned about the Revelation 12 sign, September 23rd, 2017. And that should not be in italics. So we're familiar with the woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, a crown of 12 stars. And we often apply this to the birth of Christ in 4 BC. That's what it's talking about. And then there's lots of different biblical references that we can use to understand the interpretation of that. The sun and the moon and the stars from the story of Joseph, the serpent and the woman back to Genesis 3:15, the sun and the moon and the stars in the 4th day of creation, and the dragon representing Satan, but also pagan Rome at the time of the birth of Christ, and the 1260 days that follow, 1260 years. Was there eclipse in 4 BC? I don't know. So I guess I could look that up. Thanks for that question. And so we know that these 1260 days from Daniel 7:25 refer to the period of the papal persecution that began in the 6th century. So that's the 1260 years we know of. Now, dispensationalist interpretation of this passage uses futurism, right? So they look at what's happening in the sky, and they interpret this as the beginning of 1260 days until the rapture, right? That's originally how most of them interpreted it. And now normally there's 9 stars above the constellation Virgo. So the woman and the dragon are the constellations of Virgo and Draco. And so normally there's 9, but in September of 2017, there's going to be 3 extra stars above her head. That's going to be Mercury, Venus, and Mars that we're seeing above the head of the Virgin, Virgo. And the moon is going to be under her feet. That's at the time of the new moon, because the sun is in Virgo. That's why the woman's clothed with the sun. And so on the first day of the 7th month, on the 1st of Tishri, that is Rosh Hashanah, you're going to see this new moon under her feet. That's just going to be the thin crescent moon would be visible on the evening of beginning September 23rd. Now, there was also, it says that the woman is pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Now, it says the planet Jupiter traversed Virgo's womb after entering it on November 20th, 2016, and exited the womb approximately 42 weeks later. That's the maximum length of human gestation. Normally, human gestation is 39 weeks, which is 273 days. There was also the suggestion that the comet Borisov, dubbed the Conception Comet, entered Virgo, impregnating her 3 days before Jupiter entered Virgo's womb. This complete alignment occurred on September 23rd, 2017, over Jerusalem. This coincided with Rosh Hashanah, which commenced the Feast of Trumpets and marked the end of the rabbinic Jewish year 5777, sometimes abbreviated to the significant number 777, right? So there was all of this stuff. Now, this is a GIF of this sign, Revelation 12 sign. So you can see they got the woman's womb there. They show Virgo, the constellations. They show the planets that make up the 12 stars above her head. And they show the Conception Comet, or not the Conception Comet, the Jupiter moving and staying in that womb, in Virgo for that period of time, of 42 months, which is an interesting number, by the way. So that's why they attach to it, this 3.5-year tribulation period, 42 months, 1260 days. There's all of these different symbols that are there. So obviously, we know that November 9th, 2019 is 30 years to the day from the fall of the Berlin Wall. So that's 777 days that end the rabbinic year are going to count from 777 days to November 9th, 2019.
Where's the comet? I don't see the comet.
Yeah, they didn't show the comet. I didn't show the comet. That's just they're just showing the Jupiter moving there. You have to look at other images to see the conception comet. So the conception comet enters Virgo's womb 3 days before Jupiter does.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Right. And then Jupiter stays there for 42 months. Right. So we can see the connection with 1260 days, right, as a symbol. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just looking at a question here. Okay, I don't know about the magnitude of the April 8th eclipse has to Africa and Uganda. Yeah, I'm not sure that you'll see any of that eclipse in Africa. I don't think that you would. Just not 100% certain. I'm pretty sure you wouldn't see anything. Okay, so I think it's kind of interesting. Obviously, I have to put this paper together in much better detail. There's lots of things I have to add. I have to correct all my typos. But I do think the significance of this eclipse is more for this movement. That all of these other, the fact that we have Nashville and then Arkansas, right, Bonnerdale, experiencing these two eclipses, I think that would tie it together. Now, the time between these two eclipses is 6 years, 7 months, and 18 days. So we can see the 7 months and 18 days obviously are significant. And then we're going to have from April 10th, we're going to have 6 years to the first day of the first month in 2030. So there's a connection there as well. But I know it's not a great presentation because it's kind of scattered a bit. But any final comments before we close with prayer?
Interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. But definitely we're not, predicting anything on April 8th, other than I predict it to be a solar eclipse. But that's the most I can predict. Okay.
Well, the odds of that lining up with the events in the movement are pretty slim.
Yeah. So I think that especially Nashville and then Bonnerdale and the other symbols that are attached with these spans of time. I think that we would have to say that it at least is a message to us. And about rejecting July 18th. There's more in it here. I just didn't want to go into too much detail. It'll be in the paper. People can read it once it's done. Okay, well, let's close with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for the studies that we've had today. I pray for each person again. You know that there's trials that we all face. And so we give our lives to you. We leave them into your hands. And we know, Lord, that there's many disappointments that we experience. But we ask, Lord, that we can trust in you in spite of what happens. Thank you for these messages regarding the symbolic use of numbers and how they relate to these eclipses and to this movement. And that we can see your hand, not just in the events of the world, but in our personal lives as well. Thank you for hearing our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.